Ryan, Happy New Year, mate.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well, Colin.
Thank you so much. I tell you what, here we are. We're on YouTube now. We're just about to come into the 2023. This is being launched, I believe, on the 31st of December 2022. So Happy New Year tomorrow, mate.
Thanks. That means we're going to be, when this launches, we're going to be moving into a period of about 4 months where I will continue to write 2022 on everything that I do.
I tell you what, writing 2022, there's sometimes when I take a step back and I think, bloody hell, that's
Yeah.
2022. That's
That's-
2022.
yeah.
I remember back in, 1998 thinking, cool, 2022's, God,
Yeah. We're,
it's
we're
like
now
the
like
future. We're,
decades past a lot of sci-fi novels.
we'll be on Mars by
Yeah.
then, God, dear. Yeah, Ryan and I will have a successful podcast. You
Yeah.
never know your luck.
That's right. Dare to dream. Yeah.
So today, I am sure that everybody here, or a number of you, are sitting there thinking, I wonder what my New Year's resolution should be.
That's right.
Probably not saying it in a stupid voice like that, but there you go.
Maybe that was their resolution. Use more stupid voices throughout the. In fact,
Yeah.
I think I've got a New Year's resolution now that we mentioned.
Yeah, maybe we should do that for the future. So we're going to look a bit at New Year's resolutions. We're going to look at what works and what
Hmm.
doesn't work, and all those other wonderful things. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is actually was born from. It's a year ago today. No, in fact, I tell a lie. It was a year ago on the 24th of December that I finished losing a lot of weight. Okay, and I'm just going to tell this personal story for a
It's
moment
it's a
because
little weird for you to have a date for when you stopped losing weight, Colin. Usually people have a date for when they start a diet. You were
well,
like, all right, I see this Christmas pie, and I got to tell you, like, this is the end. This is the last date on
well,
which I will
this
lose.
this is why it seared on my brain, which is why it was so significant to me. Okay, um, so I've struggled with, and I'm going to tell this personal story just because I think there's lots of sort of little bits of learning coming out of there. So I'm going to bore you for a moment. Um, I've struggled with my weight all my life. Okay. And all you've got to do is Google Colin Shaw, and you'll see me at various different weight stages throughout my last 20 years. Okay. And my wife and I decided to go on a big diet because my wife needed to go for a big back operation. So a year ago, last September, we went on a diet, and it was one of these really sort of crash diets.
Right.
Okay, ultra low calorie diet,
I mean, it
and
was medically supervised or recommended, right? You guys
well,
did.
yes, it was. It was. Yeah. So
I
that's the
just didn't want
point.
to give the impression that you guys were like, drinking nothing but juice and eating celery on
No,
your own whim. Like
no. So my
this was
wife,
under
because she's
advisement.
yeah, my wife because she has a back problem and was needed to have an operation. The consultant basically said, "Look, you need to lose weight before we do this," and he suggested this diet. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'm not being paid anything by doing that. I just given New Year's resolutions, people may want to look at it. It's called a thing called Lighter Life, and one of the things that he talked about was because interestingly enough, he was overweight as well. Okay, and one of the things he talked to us about when we were there having this sort of consultation was the fact that when you eat, you're not just eating because you're hungry, but you're eating because of the way you feel.
Mm.
And he suggested this particular diet, and one of the advantages that it came along with it was that they provided some counselling at the
Mhm.
same time, because what he was saying, which I doing this podcast, I like all this stuff, was saying it's a sort of the relationship that you have with food, and I would extend that to other things that you
Absolutely.
get into habits for, and that started to sort of intrigue me a bit, and so we started this diet. the good news was I've lost 90 pounds. Okay. Which is, I don't know, a lot, basically.
That's a lot. Any way you want to frame
Yeah,
that, that's a lot.
it is. I'm just trying to think of the conversions, but it's a lot. 90 pounds in weight. Anyway, long and short of it was that when I started to examine why I was eating, I discovered that a lot of the things I was doing was from an habitual perspective, and was also due to the way I was feeling, and therefore the relationship I had with food. Okay, so let me give you an example. If I was particularly upset or stressed, guess what I would do? I would eat. Yeah.
Yep.
If something had gone particularly well, guess what? Let's go out and celebrate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you start to sort of build all this. Every time I got up from my desk to stretch my legs, the first thing I did was to go to the fridge.
Yep.
And I became a great grazer.
Yep.
So I would still have my meals, but I became a great grazer. And it was the interesting bit for me was was an automatic process that just happened automatically, which is again in the whole space that we're talking about here. And I'm gonna ask you for your psychoanalysis of me, other than I'm completely mad, in a moment. But the other part of it was then the way that I was then thinking and talking about food. So on previous diets, because I've been on many diets in my life, on previous diets, I was saying, I can't have this.
Yeah.
I can't eat that. I'm not allowed to eat that. And one of the, I say, we had this consultant that sort of helped us, or counselor, not consultant, counselor that helped us sort of think all this stuff through. And what you realised was that it's actually all in your brain, yeah. And one of the things that she talked about was, and little tricks that she gave us, was to say things like, not I can't have that, but to say, I could have that, but I'm going to have it tomorrow. In other words, you're not telling your brain something very negative. You're telling your brain that you could do it, and maybe you will do it at some point, but it's not going to be this particular moment. And I find little things like that really helped, as I've then, over that period of time and ever since then, felt I'm really feeling stressed. I fancy something to eat. Thinking, no, the only reason that you want something to eat is because you're feeling stressed.
It's because you've
So
just finished recording some podcasts with Ryan, and
very
just
stressed.
stressed through the roof. Yeah.
Very, and beforehand, very anxious about the
Right. Sure.
recordings
Of
as well.
course. Yeah.
Notice I haven't said happy yet.
No. Nobody was expecting that.
But does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
So there's two broad things. The second one that you mentioned, what I like about that is that's just a framing effect,
yeah,
a framing manipulation that you're performing on yourself. So we've talked about framing before in various contexts. So loss framing is one that we've talked about plenty of times. But this is something that we do in persuasion. Um, it's often surprising that we can do a lot of these things to ourselves if we want to, and that's what you were doing. That's what this consultant, this counselor recommended, is that instead of
sure.
thinking about this in a negative term, try thinking about it in a more neutral or positive term, and that'll a lot of times make it easier.
So let's talk about this now. I've got that personal story out of the way, and that's sort of just to make it sort of illustrative. Let's talk about this in the context of New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
Really, what we're talking about here is change.
Yeah.
Okay, whether it's change at an individual level or change at an organizational level, you're talking about change because you're talking about human beings, aren't you?
Yeah.
And for me, there's two or three important parts of it. One is the emotions linked to the action. The second part of it is habits and how powerful those can be and destructive those can be, because they can be positive or negative. And the third part of it is that whole area of framing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm going to even simplify it there and say that a lot of number one and number two are actually can be approached from the same perspective. So I think that some of the reason that we form good and bad habits is around the emotions that those behaviors elicit.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Good point.
so I think that when we talk about New Year's resolutions, most often we are talking about either breaking bad habits or forming good habits or both.
Yeah.
So I think it's useful for us to briefly review habits and what they are, and then we can kind of tie this into New Year's resolutions more broadly. And I
Yep.
think
Sounds good.
back to the example you gave, because I think that was very illustrative and will be uh, very common to anyone listening to this.
Sure.
We've all been through the same experience you described, often not as successfully as you were. But so habits are pretty straightforward. Let's go back to something we talk about a lot, which is this two system model of cognition. The idea that people have within themselves two different ways of thinking about things. In the psychology literature, we call these system one and system two, which is not very intuitive. So when you and I wrote our book, we called them the intuitive system and the rational system.
Yep.
So I'll try to use that language. So habits exist when our intuitive system, the system one, observes some environmental cue. So something that happens out in the world, and it responds by saying, essentially, I know what's supposed to happen here. And then it tries to be helpful by pulling up all of these automatic responses that nudge us in a direction. So they can be memories, they can be emotions, they can be desires or goals, all of these things, but they're not overpowering. In other words, like there's this view of habits as like, well, once a habit is kicked in, we can't do anything about it. Don't
Sure.
think of it that way. Instead, what it does is it lines up it lines us up to respond in a certain way. It makes a certain response easier for us. So far, so good.
So yeah, yeah. So let me be clear for the audience, and I'm sure a lot of you people know this, but I'm sure also some others don't. That with the intuitive system, system one is automatic. So
Yes, thank you.
we don't get a choice about whether we think this or not. It's
Yes.
effectively the gut reaction to a situation that you're in. It's the automatic situation you're in, and you will execute against that uh, unless something tells you to stop, which is effectively system two, or as we call it, the rational system. So I look at a cream bun and I go, "Oh, that's nice."
Yep.
So in fact, let's build that up. You know, I'm just about to go on a podcast with Ryan. I'm
Hmm.
feeling stressed.
Yes. Very
Oh,
stressed.
look.
Yeah.
Oh, look, cream bun. I'll
Yep.
have that because I know that this is going to be stressful and that's going to give me some form of reward,
Exactly.
or sugar high or whatever it may be, because my rational system hasn't come in and gone, wait, you're meant to be on a diet. Don't do that.
Excellent. Yes. So thank you for that clarification. That's really important. So the automatic system, the intuitive system is automatic, and we don't control it. So think of it like the pancreas of your brain. Like you can't control your pancreas. You can't make it work harder or slower or faster. It just does its thing. System one is like that. Like it's even though it's part of our mind, we cannot actively control it. And so it's there just contributing. So it's the part that reminds you when you see a cream bun that, oh, this is something that you really like, right? Let's pull up memories of when you've eaten that before and enjoyed it. And so it kind of is nudging you in that direction towards the cream. All right, so we've got this environmental cue, that's one part of a habit. We've got the automatic response, that's the second part of the habit. And then we've got the rational system, which can either move in that direction or not. The third part of habits is the one that you mentioned, which is this reinforcement mechanism. Right. So if when we see the environmental cue and we automatically have this set of responses. And then we get some kind of reward for doing that. That's what locks a habit in place.
Right.
So if you've ever trained a dog, you've gone through this process, right? Psychologists call it operant conditioning.
What? Giving a dog a cream bun?
Right, whatever it takes to reward the dog to get that dog to do what you want it to do. Um,
Right.
so for dogs, the rewards are usually pretty straightforward. It's things like a treat, some kind of
Yeah.
food, affection. Um, for people, we can have a lot more rewards. If we make something easy, that can be a reward. So we don't have to think about it. That's a reward. These emotions that you were talking about, that can serve as a reward. If it tamps down our anxiety, that's a reward. If it makes us feel good, that's a reward.
Yeah.
The thing that people sometimes miss, though, in this process, all of those rewards that form those habits, they have to be rewards that our intuitive system appreciates. So
Right.
not all rewards work. So if you've got a goal of like looking great for swim season, right? I want to
Yeah.
look great in my bathing suit come
Yeah.
summer, and so I want to exercise to do that. That
Yeah.
reward of eventually looking good, that is not something that our intuitive system can pick up on. It
Right.
doesn't care about long-term goals, right? It cares about cream buns, right? It
Right.
cares about chocolate cake. It cares about sleeping in. Those
Sure.
are rewards
So
that it
immediacy.
appreciates. Yes, immediacy, and also kind of like base or intuitive rewards. So emotional rewards, kind of reward systems around taste or affection. All of these things, it will social cues. All of these things that will respond to immediately. So this helps explain the asymmetry in the habits that we form. So if we want to form a good habit, say you want to start running every morning when you wake up, right? So you set your alarm clock, and that's your environmental cue. So when your alarm clock goes off, what you want is then to get out of bed, put on your shoes, and go running. Well, that environmental cue is going to like pull up a series of actions that system one, this intuitive system, is like saying, oh, okay, so put on your shoes and then go out and do the thing. Unfortunately, for most of us, for me especially, I hate running. And
Yeah.
so there's no reward mechanism that reinforces that habit, right? So we've got this
Right.
good action that we want to take, but our intuitive system is not getting any reward out of that. And instead, it's often getting punishment. We feel sore. We have to get out of bed, which system one likes staying in bed. And so there's nothing to reinforce that. So good habits tend to be very difficult to form. Bad habits, on the other hand, like if you after dinner start eating a chocolate,
Yeah.
then in like 3 days, you can form that habit to always have a chocolate after dinner because having
Sure.
a chocolate is an intuitive system reward. And so your
Sure.
intuitive system will respond to that and go, oh, dinner's over. Well, I know what's supposed to happen now. And it'll cue up those behaviors because it enjoys that reward.
Sure. And I guess it must be thinking about it because, again, if I think back to the diets that I've been on over the years, you 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 put things off as well, don't you?
Yeah.
So, in other words, I can start the diet tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll wait till Monday and then I'll start it.
Well, there's a
And
reason that we do New Year's resolutions. Like we all could have started the diet on December 21st. There's nothing
yes,
magical about New Year's Day,
yes,
but it serves as kind of a trigger and
yes,
and then as soon as we fail on our resolution on like January 3rd, it's like, well, got to wait another year. I certainly can't start a diet on
yeah.
January 7th. Got to wait until next year.
But it also makes me think about when you think of New Year's resolutions, and I've like loads of people have made loads and broken loads. Is I think it's just about how serious you are, isn't it? And again,
Sure.
if I was to equate this to again into business and to customer experience, lots of organizations have said we're going to improve our customer experience. They've started to get into it and gone, hey, this is tougher than we thought. And again, I'm exaggerating to make a point. Let's not bother.
Yeah.
Let's not give it the resources. Let's not put the money into it, the people, whatever it may be, because effectively what you're saying is um, it's not worth it. It reminds me of something. Last week we did the podcast on the things that we learned last week. Not the things we learned last week, but the things we've learned for this year, and we launched it last week. And one of the things that just reminded me of was when I was thinking about that, I watched a video where somebody said one of the key things is understanding that no response is a response.
Mm.
And I thought, I like that.
Yeah.
Because, not doing something is just as much a response as saying, no, I'm not going to do it, or saying, yes, I am going to do it. In fact, to a certain extent, it's an even more voluble response, isn't it? If voluble is a word. But anyway, sorry.
Going back to your point. So I think habits are an important part of resolutions and change, understanding how bad habits form and how we can break them, understanding how we can form good habits. But especially for something like a good habit, your point about needing to motivate that change is a good one. There's this cliche almost about how long it takes to form a habit. I'm sure you've heard this.
I think I have.
Good. I'm glad you haven't. So there's a bit of bad advice out there.
I have
Say
a
that it
habit
takes.
of not taking much notice of what you tell me. Is that a good habit or a bad habit? I can't remember.
That tends to work well for people. Actually, that's a good habit. You should definitely do it. No, this is. There's a bit of advice out there that says that it takes 21 days to form a habit.
That's right. Yeah.
And so if you want to form a habit, you need to do something for every day for 21 days. And I don't know where that number comes from. There may even be some study somewhere that showed that on average that's how long it took. But I don't believe it. Like it's because, like I said, bad habits you can form immediately.
Sure.
But good habits, there's nothing magical that happens on day 22. It's not like you struggle to run every morning when you wake up, and then on day 22,
Sure.
all of a sudden now it's easier. For a lot of good habits, this motivation part, it needs to be there. Like it takes time to form a habit, especially a good habit, and until it forms and your automatic system starts helping you, it requires willpower. You need to be able to do it, and that requires motivation. So,
and the interesting thing is, as you were talking about it, I was thinking to myself, even what's the definition of good?
yeah,
a good habit.
Wow,
So
this
how
got
do I?
deep really fast. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
How do I define a good habit? Well, and I guess for me it goes back to that sort of motivation. One of the reasons that Lorraine and I lost the weight we did was because of her need to have this operation on her
That's right.
back.
Yep.
Okay, so
that provided the motivation.
Well, that was the key.
Yep.
Which is, if I was to look at times in the past where we'd lost weight, then we didn't necessarily have that motivation or that willpower to carry on. And the real interesting thing for me actually is it's not the losing the weight that's the issue; it's the keeping it off.
Sure.
Because again, I've lost weight in the past, but it's then the real battle becomes forming the habits, and this is actually interesting. Forming the habits that you want to have for the rest of your life, but the other part is how easy it is to slip back into the old habits.
Yep.
And they're a bit like a old pair of shoes. They're very comfortable because that's the way that you're sort of not created, but that's the way that you've lived, and you're happy with that. And suddenly, it's a bit like do they have in the States? Do they have dry January?
Yes, it's become a thing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not
and
like
it has in England.
yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say we don't drink a lot of alcohol
So
we're
this is where
social.
people make the goal of not drinking any alcohol for
Yeah,
January.
not drinking any alcohol for the month of January. So I say I don't drink a lot of alcohol. I, I, we're social drinkers, so
Mhm.
that's never really been a challenge for me. But a number of my friends do it, and the interesting
Well,
bit
then I think we
is
need to make a goal for you of lush April, where you drink a lot every day.
maybe I should drink all the alcohol that they haven't drunk,
That's right, exactly. It's
and then
probably
I
on
would
sale in January.
and then I'll forget it's January.
That's right.
But the point I was
Yeah.
making, trying to get to there was that's for a limited period,
Yes.
isn't it? And that feels achievable. And maybe that's then within, maybe that's like that framing bit, which is I could have a drink, but I'm going to have it tomorrow. So you get to the end of January, I could have a drink, but I'm going to have it tomorrow. The danger is that if you just go, well, that was January and I'm now going to restart,
Yeah.
that's fine if that's the way what you want to do. But the other part of that is, well, if you actually want to change things permanently, then how do you start reframing things after just a month, as it were? Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
the research on goal setting and goal maintenance is vast, and it's because this is so complicated. Exactly what you're saying. For a lot of us, like when we have that hard goal, that hard endpoint, like I want to lose weight for this reunion, or I want to, lose a certain amount of weight, then when we hit that goal, it can be very motivational to get there. Um, but then once we hit it, that can then be demotivational. Like
Yes,
maintenance is harder in some ways
yes,
than progress because there's
yes,
no reward. Like the reward is, well, things didn't get worse this week,
yeah,
and that's not as rewarding. And so we need
no,
to then shift and look for other sources of
yes,
motivation,
yeah,
which can be
no,
hard.
absolutely, yeah, good. So, the so I guess I let me start that again because that was a load of rubbish, wasn't it? So we hope that that has given you some insight a bit into New Year's
Well,
resolutions.
before we close out, I've got some recommendations. Like we can.
Oh, blimey!
I feel like we gave people a
I'll tell
lot
you
of
what.
bad news. I've got
Right. Well, my New Year's resolution is to check with you that you haven't got some form of insight that you want to share with us
you
before I
were just
decide to
playing with
close the
numbers,
podcast.
Colin. I mean, how often do I have something intelligent to say at the end? Like that was you were just playing smart. All right, so my recommendation is actually based off of something that an actor said. So there's this great actor named Terry Crews, um, and he's been in a number of different things. So you can look him up if you're not familiar with his name. But he is tremendously physically fit. The guy just has muscles on muscles on muscles, and so he gets a lot of people when they meet him asking him about how they can get in shape. Like, what works for you? What can I do to get better in shape? And he actually gives fantastic advice, like really lines up with the psychology, whether he knows it or not. His advice to people, he says that when people engage in an exercise program, they do it wrong because they'll like New Year's Day or January 2nd, we're going to go to the gym and we're going to hit it hard and we're going to like do, and what that does is it just builds up the pain. So it might be a little socially awkward going into a gym if you haven't been for a long time. It's a little intimidating. And then you really hit it hard. And then the next day you're so sore you can barely move. System one is picking up on all of that and going, this is terrible. Like, why would we ever do this? And so now that willpower that it took to get you to the gym in the first place, now system one is actively fighting against you and saying, like, stay in bed. This is awful. So his advice is, and now my advice to you is work on building up intuitive system rewards. So if you want to go to the gym, for example, his advice is to just go and don't exercise. Like sit on an exercise bike and pedal as slowly as you can and read a magazine, right? Or go and hang out with a friend and just have a conversation there. But
or
make the
or take
goal. Pardon?
or take a packed lunch with you and
Take a back
have
lunch.
it whilst
His goal is, he says the goal should be to go to the gym.
right.
Just make that the goal. Go
Yep.
and then make it as enjoyable as you can. There was a study they did where people who went to the gym could listen to these audiobooks that were like cliffhanger books, like
Right.
mystery books, but you could only listen to the book when you were at the gym. And so
Right.
like it provided this sense of
Yeah.
enjoyment. It was
That's a good
fun.
idea. I like that.
Make that the goal. And then now your automatic system is like being rewarded. Now
Yeah.
it's working for you to try to, and once you've developed that habit where you're going, then you can ease your way into the exercise, but kind of front load the benefits, the automatic system, the intuitive system benefits, and put off the pain as much as you can, right? Ease into that.
Yeah. Good idea.
That's my advice.
That was worth waiting for, mate.
Good.
I have to tell you. My New Year's resolution is to listen to you more,
Okay,
particularly at the end of podcast.
That'll mostly be pain. I'll warn you now, but good. I'm
It's
glad.
worth it for the occasional gem. Okay, so we hope that's been of use. We hope you set some really good New Year's resolutions, and both business and personal. And we hope you stick to them and let us know how they go. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Okay, cheers.